Well, good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council for Tuesday, December 19th to order. Welcome, everybody. And we're going to get right into consent. And Council, I just want to bring your attention on item number 16, paragraph 2. It states the contract with KHOI-FM in the amount of $170,000. It really should be the contract for Octagon Center for the Arts. So it was just an inadvertent typo in there. The alternative that you're being asked to take action on is accurate. Is there anybody who wants to pull any items from the consent?
Mayor, I'd like to pull item 15.
15?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to pull item 3, please.
Anything else? All right. Entertain motion to approve consent. Last items number 3 and 15.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Anita?
I wanted to pull item 3 just so that people were made aware in case it got lost in the consent items that the Public Nuisance Appeals Board has been selected. And since number 31, we will be talking about that. Just wanted people to be aware that they are in place and ready to go.
Thank you. Entertain a motion on that item.
Move approval of item 3.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. And item number 15, Gloria?
I pulled this one, Mayor, because I think we're trying to highlight things that we're doing that have to do with sustainability and furthering our climate action goals. So I guess Corey's here to talk to us.
Yes. So this is for the auditorium HVAC system. As you know, we've been working on this for a while. We identified more funding. We're working with the consultants to redesign this. So we're going to, when we first bid this, I think almost 2 years ago, as a traditional system, we asked them to go back and take any natural gas out of the system. So it would be all electric system. Then they came back to us and said, what about replacing an air-cooled condenser with a heat pump that would serve all the other heat pumps in City Hall? So obviously there's more funding required. We're kind of going through the budget process now, so we're going to work on that, see if there's a solution to that. But we think this would be a great idea to follow the climate action plan and be one of the 6 big moves that we identified.
Thank you. Thanks, Corey.
And thank you.
I would move approval of item 15, alternative 1.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, move on to public forums. Time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business that are not listed on the agenda. And ask people to limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. Richard, you want to start us off tonight?
When I first came to Ames, the very first time I spoke to the city council meeting, I had hand calligraphed out a short piece of my writing about how in my country, and it's like I made enough to give to all the people that work in the city government, and I mean 600 copies of it that I did out by hand, and I sort of since changed it, changed some of the words to it a little bit, but it's like one of the gists of it was that it's like a crime to measure space and time in seconds, hours, and year. And it's like I wouldn't asking people to spend a day with me or me to spend a day with them so I could get to know them, they could get to know me. We could build the world a better place one day at a time. I went around asking people to do that, and I've actually done it with a few people. It's not, I don't feel I kind of feel it's very awkward to do it considering the last couple of people I've actually spent a day with. There was a journalism student that Iowa State did it about me, to talk about me being naked. And she did an article about me being crazy. And I was a little bit hurt by that. And it's like the next person I spent a day with, it's like she, after it was all, things happened that the car broke down and we had to go into And it's like things like that happen that ruin the day.
Richard,
Yeah.
can you focus on items of city business? Thank you. Anybody else want to address council under public forum? If you'd introduce yourself and you may start.
Good evening, council. My name is James Johnson. My backyard is North River Valley Park. During the summer, I did witness something that was rather strange while I was home making lunch. I saw 2 unmanned commercial mowers going back and forth. A little concerned, I went out there and I realized Josh Thompson and a couple other city employees were testing robot mowers. And in talking with them briefly, I discovered that part of the consideration was because of staffing. Fast forward to baseball season, and I realized there's a lot of kids in the baseball team that are dedicated, willing to show up on time, willing to work hard in the hot summer months. And with the considerations of last year's state law that allows younger kids, I asked if the city council would consider lowering the age for grounds and maintenance to 16 years old. I think you'd have a win-win situation. There's a lot of kids, I call them non-traditional employment situations, when those kids are going to baseball games and with varying different levels of skill, puts them at different practice times, games coming and going to and from. And then with the weather being what it is, I think it'd be a great opportunity to put kids that are willing to work hard and pair them up with an opportunity with the city to help get grass cut. And so if you'd consider that in 2024, I'd really appreciate it. I know there's at least one member of council that has someone near and dear to them that plays hard in the baseball team and also cuts grass quite often. So we know their capabilities. I know when I was in the military, we weren't allowed to operate anything unless we were actually showed proficiency. So I think that the city would be able to put together a small program, as any employee would coming on board, to show that they have the proficiency to operate that equipment. And I'm sure a program could be put in place where there's success for everyone there. So just like to have you consider that for next year.
Thank you for your suggestion. Appreciate it. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public forum. Move on to item number 26, 5th Street Brick Piers with ceramic reliefs. Brian and some of the Public Art Commission members.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The council requested that this item be revisited after the council took some action in the summer. So we have a couple of Public Art Commission members here tonight. Kyle Hosworth is chair, Eric Briest, and Candace Swank. So they're here to provide some background information and answer any questions you might have as the discussion goes on. And I'll be at my table if you have any questions for me. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Like Brian said, my name's Kyle Hosworth. I'm the chair of the Public Art Commission. Today's actually my wedding anniversary, so the fact that I'm here tells you how much passion I have for this and for inclusivity in Ames, I believe.
I hope you're not in trouble.
I'm not. Don't worry. I cleared it with my wife.
Do you need to write a note or something?
I'll talk to you afterwards.
All
Thank
right,
you very much.
we can do that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So I want to thank you all for allowing me to speak today on behalf of the Public Art Commission. The discussion about these piers has been ongoing for some time, and I'm happy to be here to speak on the commission's process and thoughts as we developed our recommendation to the council to deaccession these piers. I'd like to start with just some historical context on how we got here. These were first brought to the commission's attention through a few community members who are mobility or visually impaired. They commented that the piers made navigation and access to downtown Ames difficult or sometimes downright dangerous, and asked that the commission look at options to remove or relocate them. The commission at that point asked city staff to investigate options. We looked at moving the piers, but that was the option that city staff was least receptive to. There would be massive excavation required due to how they are seated. Potential utilities would need to be moved in that space. It was just not an option that was very receptive. We looked at options to preserve the terracotta inserts, which are the part of the piers that are technically in the Public Art Commission. or the public art collection. And while the commission is incredibly supportive of the efforts to save the inserts, as council asked the city to do at the meeting in the summer that they approved deaccession, based on our speaking and the staff speaking with experts, no one is super confident that those will be able to be removed in a way that is not exceedingly expensive, and there's still no guarantee of success there. The technical feasibility of that extraction is very much still up in the air as to if that is a feasible option or not. With this in mind, we asked the city to reach out to Ames Main Street because it had become clear to us that we would unfortunately have to remove them. We'd asked about the option to only remove the true problem piers that really represented issues being placed in the right of way and being real impediments to movement. Main Street responded, and the commission read their responses, preferring all of them to be removed. I believe in the packet that you all had during that first meeting, that email was included, and I think the reading of that was fairly straightforward. With this in mind and with a heavy heart, we voted to recommend deaccession to the city council. This decision wasn't easy. This was a lot of months of discussion. Downtown Ames and the entire Main Street area is my wife and my favorite part of the city. I think the piers are an interesting addition to the area, but when it boiled down to it, for me personally, if those piers are impeding even one person from feeling safe and able to experience the downtown corridor, then they should be removed. Ames is a great city. We're proud of being equitable and inclusive, but it's really easy to be inclusive when it's easy. When we're being asked to make difficult decisions, to make sacrifices, that's when a community can really stand up and show their true values. There are a lot of really fascinating and accessible ways to learn about Ames history, but there's only one downtown Ames. And when it came down to it, when thinking about these piers and the problem they present, I wasn't willing to sacrifice people's ability to enjoy the downtown area for one of many sources of history on Ames. That's the thought process I took into these discussions, and I would ask the council to uphold their previous decision to proceed with the deaccession and removal of the piers to make downtown Ames more accessible and available to everyone. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do either of the other members want to make any comments?
He pretty much summed it up.
Okay, very good. You're good?
Unless you have any additional questions, we're quite proud of what Kyle has said.
Thank you. All right. Questions for,
I have one question. While we've been receiving additional input, we did receive at least one email from an individual who I believe is blind, maybe just vision impaired, who uses the piers for navigating downtown. And I'm wondering if you heard that from anybody, because of course that counters the other accessibility question and adds an interesting complication.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, we don't know what we don't know.
Mhm.
And we don't know what others know. And when it came down to it, I can walk up and down Main Street, up and down Fifth Street without a problem, obviously. But when we're hearing from some community members that they pose a danger, that to me, the fact that that they could be dangerous offsets a lot of other potential concerns with keeping them.
Yes, some other of our fellow commission members, thank you, have shared that even if one person, to make the point, can't safely traverse downtown Ames and all it has to offer, it's our responsibility to look into that and do what we can to improve it. Also, I'd like to say, as far as many types of people with disabilities are not a monolith. I myself was able to relate to difficulty. I don't need it today, but sometimes I require the use of a walker. And I had an experience specifically with the piers on 5th and Kellogg during the winter. It was icy and snowy, and I wasn't able to get my walker across, and I was faced with falling either forward into the pier because it's right in the middle of the walking intersection or backwards into the street. And I chose to fall backwards, knowing that forward I was going to definitely land on my walker and maybe hit my head on the pier. And luckily, my husband slowed down my fall enough that I didn't tumble back all the way into the street.
Other questions?
Not a question, just a comment. I just want to thank everyone on the Public Art Commission. I think you guys took a lot of time and were very deliberate in how you came to this decision. Everyone up here knows I work for Mainstream Living outside of my role in council. You may not know that, but I just did some anecdotal asking around the office and with some of our staff, and I would say there was a lot of agreement that the pillars do pose some challenges for most particularly our folks in wheelchairs and who are visually impaired. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I just wondered about this idea of getting rid of all of them rather than just the ones that perhaps are on Main Street itself, like in the main traffic area. What was your thought process about all rather than just the ones that might be in the more well-trafficked areas?
So the piers were all along Fifth Street, not technically Main Street. I kind of lump it all together as the Main Street corridor because there's fantastic shops throughout the entire area. That was something that was looked at. However, in conversations with the Main Street Design Committee, I believe is who it was, we posed that option, and their response, as shown in the packet that you received for the summer meeting, I believe, I don't know if it's included today, but their response we read as they would prefer them all to be removed as to maintain, I'm assuming, uniformity. I can't speak to them, but that's how I would see it.
Because 9 of the 16 are in the way.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, open up public comment. I know I have at least one individual who's expressed or has recorded interest, and I think Valerie would also like to express. We'll go ahead and start with Valerie, and then you could try and limit your comments to 3 or 4
Yes.
minutes. And
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I disagree that your number is correct for how many are not in the way, and I have the dimensions. 2 of them on
Excuse
deaf.
me, just if you would just address council, you
Okay.
can certainly say I disagree with the statement, but let's not get into a dialogue or pick it.
Sorry.
Please. Thank you.
I just want to disagree with the statement that that so many are more are in the way, or not in the way. Anyway, I have the dimensions, 8 feet, 9 feet from the building. They're right next to the curb. Those are the 2 on Duff. The one on Kellogg, northwest by the dentist, that's 5 feet away. That's pretty good. 9'7", that's almost 10 feet away. That's northeast Burnett. This is away from the buildings, not even in the way of obvious trafficability. Burnett, southwest one, it's right on the grass. It's not even on the sidewalk. The 2 here, north side of Clark, right by the city hall, they're both on the grass, not on the sidewalk. And both of them on Pearl, again, right on the edge of the sidewalk. So, 7, 8 feet of distance available for people who want to navigate through there. I think, yeah, we've talked about this before, and yes, these are the same answers that were given before. And, that supposedly people can't navigate around all of them and why all of them have to be removed. There was one person at the Art Commission that said, well, can we have some kind of compromise? And I think that was Joseph. Anyway, only one person who wanted to see if there was a compromise. And I think considering how many of the general public like these and think they are of value, it seems to me that we could at least save those that aren't in the way. And again, I really think decisions should be made by facts and not perception and not people's opinions without actually walking up to them, looking at them, go ahead and measure them. In terms of the expense for removing them, I was kind of surprised that the estimates include having to take out the foundations. Why is that? Why can't you just cut them off, like I suggested before, and jackhammer out a little bit of concrete, pave them over? So I understand there is a big foundation underneath them. And I still don't understand about the idea that they're still considered deteriorating. The base just needs to be resealed. There's a little bit of cracks, not cracks, but chips off of some of the bricks on the base. But like I said, I had a professional mason look at them, and he recommended just cleaning them. They have some lichen growing, a little bit of dirt, but basically they just need to be resealed. I guess that brings up the other idea, who's in charge of maintaining the artwork? Since you mentioned the other artwork by this artist that was removed because it was deteriorating, was there any opportunities to save some of these things? Anyway, I just wanted to say that, again, I have looked at this from a lot of different angles, and I don't see why all of them have to be removed. There's just the question of why, is what everybody keeps asking me, why do they have to be removed? Even the snow idea. I asked about the snow removal, and I talked to the wife of one of the contractors who removes the snow, and he says these have never been a problem. And he pointed out there's a lot of things they have to slow down to work around for snow removal. All the planters, I think there's like 29 planters on Main Street, trash cans, fire hydrants, the brown posts that are at each intersection, other poles and obstacles. He pointed out all those. They do it. It's not a problem. So I guess, again, what do we really want here? And it seems to me we're talking about two words, historic and hazardous. And I think there's enough pros on the historic side, especially the general public, that would like to see a compromise. And I think I have the facts that say these are not in the way. So either the decision has already been made to remove them all because they've already got their plans on what else they want to do, and this is a valid way to tell the public they're supposed to be removed because they already want something else to do there. So I guess, excuse me?
Would you just draw your comments to close, but also would you highlight what you see as a realistic compromise?
I think leaving the ones that aren't in the way. I'm saying 7 to 10 feet from the walls of the buildings. That should be enough space for someone to navigate.
Okay.
I guess just because you've already made your decision, it's kind of hard to talk about anything else. These are made by a man who has national recognition, has won many awards, these plaques. And as a matter of fact, he's the one who designed the High Trestle Trail Bridge. So what he did here as a former ISU professor of design, and in addition to Paul Papelka, and Falwell T. Brown, were the main ones who came up with this information. It still is, I know, mentioned before, we could just put pictures of these in the Historic Museum. And sure, it's not quite the same though, as being able to look at original art, because that's really what this is. Original art that should be taken care of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have Jim Howe is asked to speak on this one too. So Jim?
My name is Jim Howe, residence 912 Clark. I guess I understand there's some difficulties on these piers, but again, taking them all out, I'm not sure. There's a lot of the things on 6th Street where they're putting in the controls for the turn signals and all that are way closer. You can hardly get through there compared to a lot of the spots that they're talking about being a problem on 5th Street. So again, being a taxpayer, I'm somewhat concerned that we spent a lot of money on and putting them in, and now we're going to spend a bunch of money taking them back out. My taxes went up astronomically this year, and part of it goes to the art and all that, which is fine. I'm not an art connoisseur to speak of, but I enjoy the pillars, just the different things that are on there from the city of Ames and the history. But if we have these concerns, which we need to either think this through before we start doing these things, where we're spending money to put them in, and then years later we're spending money to take them back out, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It kind of bothers me that we spend that kind of money and on art, and we're required to have art in certain spots, but yet we're yanking them out for the same reason. I just don't get it. That's my 2 cents, I guess.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody else?
Second opportunity to address council. Wonderful again. James Johnson, Meadow Lane Avenue. Three things strike me as I consider the pillars on Fifth Street. One, as I get older, I recognize some of the challenges that come with age and mobility. And I've noticed during parades, many people use those to lean on. Sometimes children are sitting on them to give them a better vantage point. But primarily, what I see is a bigger impediment when people are actually trying to enter a business on Main Street of any location. That doorway is only going to be, what, 36 inches wide? And the closest one is 4 foot from a building. That seems to be adequate when you're trying to enjoy downtown. You're going to probably be frequenting a business. And by going in any one of those locations, it's a far more restrictive pathway to go through the doorway than it is to go around the pillars. The other thing is, I'm also the secretary of the Ames Coin Club. This year we'll be doing our 60th Coin Club show. And we thought, what can we do to commemorate that? And for months, we've been stymied to come up with something that identifies Ames. Everybody first, when I ask a number of people, first thing they say is ISU. I said, great. Now what's the second thing you think of? And it's been a challenge for people to identify something in Ames. And when you have something that represents the history of Ames in all different ways, I think the city could actually do a better job of maybe putting up little things that are QR code related, where somebody could scan it and learn about the history that's marked there. The Historical Society isn't always open. And so these would be great opportunities as people are passing by at any given moment to learn about our city. So I think instead of taking them out, there should be more focus to emphasize them and appreciate our history. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public input. Oh,
My name is Linda Shank, and I'm at 904 Clark Avenue. I just wanted to speak to the historic significance of this. I really appreciate those piers because of the diversity of Ames history that they represent. There's plaques for the Oneida. There's plaques for Carver. There's plaques for a series of couples who actually housed folks going through on the Underground Railroad. And I really appreciate what is sometimes a hidden diversity of our history. And I find those pillars to be very meaningful to kind of make that visible for everyone as they're just walking. So that's it.
thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public input. Council? You also have copies of emails that have come in front of you, just for information that came in here within the last either yesterday or today, in case you hadn't seen them. So a lot of public input.
Well, I'll start. I want to echo what Amber said, just the words of appreciation for the commission. And I think what you did was done for the right reason. And I think your procedure was spot on, reaching out to Main Street Cultural District to get feedback from them. And I think the vote on council was unanimous, I think, to deaccession the pillars. But one of the challenges of things like this is that we don't have particularly good ways of communicating to the public what we're doing sometimes. And frankly, I have been absolutely amazed at the number of people who have contacted us about these pillars. And I think we have to have a degree of humility in any kind of government role. This all made sense to me when I voted in favor of it, but we've had enough public input about it that it's caused me to wonder if we got it right the first time. And so these are interesting issues. Most of the things we do are fairly straightforward. The most interesting things we do on council require us to balance various interests. And so you've been very articulate in terms of what one level of concern is, and we certainly share the concerns about mobility. these pillars are built according to ADA standards. And so I'm less concerned about that. And we have to weigh that against the fact that people have become accustomed to these. I started in business on Main Street before these piers were there, and so I remember what it was like not to have them, but people have obviously become accustomed and really enjoy them. And so I think given what we have, the concern of a few versus the enjoyment of many, I would like to see the pillars remain. And so, but I don't want to say that without commending you for the work that you've done. And I think Amber was spot on that. So look forward to hearing what other council members' thoughts are.
So I can appreciate revisiting this issue after we receive some additional public input. I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that the amount of input we've received is indicative of how the entire community feels. I think even if we received 500 emails, which we received nowhere near that, that even that would not necessarily be representative of how we should vote moving forward. For me, I'm a little uncomfortable with the fact that we're dismissing people's real and actual mobility experiences with this and placing a higher value on people like them and are accustomed to them. And that's kind of where I get a little uncomfortable because I do feel like the Public Art Commission was, again, very deliberate in the way they looked at this. They have their own personal experiences that I think are very valuable and important. And so I'm going to continue to stand by our original decision, which I think was the right one.
Other input?
So when I came in tonight, having read all of the emails, I was leaning toward changing my stance on this. And hearing from the Public Art Commission in person and the lived experience of commission members, I am leaning now toward our original decision. However, I would say that that original decision came with the suggestion that our bids or our RFP seek bids for removing the art pieces and repurposing those. And from my perspective, at this point, having heard the commission's input firsthand, I have great concerns, as Amber does, about prioritizing the art value over the mobility issues. And yet, I think if we can find someone to remove the art pieces, we can put them somewhere else. We can put them in the Stephen L. Schenker Plaza. We can put them on benches. We can find somewhere else to put those so that they are not removed from the streetscape. The other thing that concerns me is that the Main Street organization is currently going through a visioning process to determine what their vision for downtown is. And I'm somewhat concerned that when they get through that process, they are going to say, these piers just don't have a place in this new vision that we have for downtown. So I'm a little bit concerned about moving ahead before that process is complete. But I think that we still have an RFP process for removal, and I would still be committed to trying to save the artwork. I am not committed to saving the piers themselves. I believe, Jim, you mentioned taxpayer dollars, and I think quite a bit of that was paid for through grants of some sort. Now, that's still taxpayer dollars, but it's at a different level than our immediate city funding. So I guess this is saying I probably am still where I was before, but Valerie, I did not come in here having decided. So I don't think anybody up here came in having decided. We're just trying to put things together as best we can and make a fair decision that represents as best possible all of the concerns, just as the Public Art Commission did. But we thank you very much for keeping this question alive.
Thank you. Any other question, any other comments?
Well, I would just echo what Gloria said in the sense that absolutely I didn't come in here decided. And in fact, I was with Gloria, having gotten all that input, I was like, oh, you know, we can think about it. But again, hearing these and thinking about it as an able-bodied person and how easy it is for me to scooch over and make that gap. It might be 4 feet from the building, but that's easy for me to say, right? And that's not how we should be thinking about it, right? We should be thinking about the people who have the most difficulty traversing the area and trying to make it more accessible for them. So it's not about a hazard, it's about accessibility, right? And that's, I think, an even different layer there. And it is a hazard to people who have those concerns, but making it accessible, I think that's a good way to think about it. And again, because I'm able to move around the pillar, maybe I can't understand what it's like to be mobility challenged and to have those kind of difficulties, but we need to try to understand and we need to try to think about that. So, but no, it wasn't decided, and I'm not making this decision because we want a bare landscape for Main Street to redesign. I mean, that's not an accurate motivation on my part either. So I'm with Gloria, though. If we can save the artwork and repurpose it, I think that's good. But I agree. It's been very educational to have you here and speaking, and I appreciate the work you've done too. So, but I do appreciate the input we've gotten from people. I know they feel strongly about these, and they feel strongly about art, which is great. I love that, right? So, so it's not that I don't hear that. I do.
Nita or Rachel?
I would agree with the comments. I do appreciate you all being here and what you've shared about your process, and again, what you all have shared about experiences, as well as Councilperson Corriere, in terms of how others do experience the area based on the presence of those pillars is very important. As with others, had not decided before coming in where I was going to land, but now hearing all of the information, think that our original position of decommissioning, and then seeing if we can save in any way those reliefs is the direction that I think that we should go.
Anything to add, Rachel?
Yeah, I would just echo a lot of what's already been said. I would maybe be interested in if we could preserve them, putting them somewhere else, or maybe keeping some of them that are out of the way. But I'm not sure if that would create more of a disjointed corridor than what we have now with the pillars. So I'm not really sure about that alternative either. But
Any feedback, Jeff?
I wasn't here for the initial conversation about this topic, so I obviously don't know a lot of the context. However, has there been a discussion on how we would go about relocating and where we would relocate said pillars to if we were to relocate the pillars?
I don't think that there really has been a discussion because the motion actually was to just demolish them. So
gotcha.
I think at the time we got a sense, of the cost it might take to move them, and in my mind at least, we have so many increasing costs coming up, and we need to be really careful with that. So I think that was why we maybe didn't go right down that route.
Gotcha. Okay.
So Brian, quick question: from the council action forum from June 13th, I didn't go back and look. Alternative one was just to de-access the 32 ceramic reliefs.
Yes.
Demolish the piers. Alternative two was authorize demolition of the piers, but direct staff to obtain quotes to have ceramic reliefs removed for use in other art projects. Do you recall? Because if there, it would make a difference in terms of how a motion might be crafted, in terms of whether it's, sustaining the previous motion might just be demolishing the existing.
So the previous direction from the council was to deaccession the art, and for there was a agreement about the sources of funding for the removal, and then staff was directed that we go obtain quotes for the demolition of the piers with an alternate. We intended to see if there was an alternate for the removal of the terracotta inserts from the piers. So we will see if anybody is willing to attempt this work. Again, there's no guarantees that
See what the motion is, but yeah, I mean, I think you've also there's been some reference in terms of the potential success or failure from people who are aware of how to deal with these to try and remove the ceramic pieces. I mean, I think that the intent could be commendable, but if they're cemented in and stuck, I think there needs to be understood that success may be limited, essentially. It's not like a stone cornerstone in a building, which has got a lot more depth. They're probably thin and they're been cast.
Right.
So anyway.
Mayor, with regard to that motion, one of the things that I find difficult is that it's hard to go out for a bid when you're doing an ad alternate that is saving the terracotta. If that is what we would like to see as the primary, it seems like that would be the bid, and then it'd be an a subtraction of some kind, which doesn't make any sense to me. But I don't think that an RFP that asks for a bid on demolition is going to yield the results that a bid for saving the terracotta pieces. And by the way, we also have this other option to demolish.
Well said. Tim, were you going to ask? We can make a comment before I cut you off.
Yeah. So the votes are what they are. But just as a parting comment, these pillars have been there for 25 years. And to my knowledge, in the last 10 years, this has never come up while I've been on council. And I spend all my time downtown. This is where I work. And I've never seen anyone have difficulty with this. Now, this is not in any way to diminish the challenge that someone had, but we can't make decisions this way. So, for example, we maintain hundreds of miles of roads in the community. And if someone says, I don't like this road, well, we go through a process of evaluating, is the road in fact dangerous? Do we need to make changes? And we look at the accident reports and we study, is the road safety effective? So we have an established process for the way we make these decisions. We're not following that here. And so we have zero evidence of any kind of problems that for something that's been there for 25 years. And we've had quite a bit, we've had more input on this issue than anything else this year. There's a lot of public input given how little we've had this year. So I do think we've had the community speak on this issue and overwhelmingly in favor of maintaining them. So I am concerned not just for the decision that we're making, but for the precedent in the way in which we're making a decision. If this is going to be the way in which we're going to make decisions based on one or two people's perception without any evidence beyond that and taking out these features, this is discordant with the way in which we make other decisions.
Well, I think that may be a little bit unfair given the fact that Public Art Commission went through and did an awful lot of evaluation, study, and asked a lot of questions. It wasn't just pulled out of the sky. But anyway.
And went to downtown Ames.
Yeah.
Well, I don't doubt that, but respectfully, do we have any, can we, is there a single incident where someone was injured because of the pillars?
I think you heard one tonight.
Yeah.
And do we need
I
to?
think you heard one tonight.
Yeah, you heard
So,
it.
but this is my point.
Yeah, let's draw to close.
I don't have the votes. I just think we have to be really careful as we make decisions about letting we have to balance various interests. And I don't think we did that tonight.
Anita or Gloria, any closing comments?
This is actually a comment about ADA compliance. It seems to me that as we're moving forward with walk, bike, roll, and trying to make the city more accessible, we should be viewing ADA compliance as a minimum as opposed to a maximum. And I think when we look at ADA, we should be saying, this is what we have to do, but could we do more in order to make accessibility more available in different locations?
Anita, do you have anything else you want to add?
And I was just going to say that it appears to me that we did follow our process in terms of we have a group that is responsible for the commissioning and decommissioning of art, who studied the issue, made a recommendation, checked with Ames Main Street, made sure that everyone was on board with that decision, and then brought it forward to us to make that decision, to make that final decision. So it appears to me that we have followed due process.
Thank you.
But in fairness,
Nothing to add. Thank you.
in fairness, and I'm not going to delay this meeting.
Oh.
But the ADA was followed. So, I mean,
Yes.
play this out in the
The
future.
ADA is woefully inadequate.
So,
It has
so,
been for
so
years.
when
Okay,
are
I'm
we
gonna-
going to, so are we going to create a new standard here that we're going to, I mean, how do we design things? So as a city, we build things. We build buildings, we build roads, and we follow the ADA standards. So tonight, the council is going to say, no, ADA is not good enough. We're going to have a new standard. I mean, this is the challenge. What do we tell our staff and our engineers that the ADA is not sufficient? That's what you're saying.
But we're also still valuing what is on the pillars and trying to maintain that. And I think that's an important component. We're not negating the historical significance of those and are trying to find that sort of balance between those needs.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Do we need another motion?
Yes.
Yeah, because right now, they're going to be basically just, they're going to be demolished.
Oh,
There's
well,
no.
You should do
that's
the
why-
one about the.
That's
trying
why
to
I
save
was,
the thing
that's
for-
why I was clarifying, Brian, is that if you say, leave it stand, they'll be torn down, there'll be no attention, there'll be no desire to try and save the 32 pieces of art. So we have to actually make a motion to change that, to give direction, as you were talking about, is to get a bid to try and save it, and then,
And it could be through either saving the plaque, or if it were cheaper to chop off the pillar and move it, that would be something we could entertain too.
and the other thing I just want to bring up, you made the comment about, is it worth delaying removal until the Main Street visioning is completed, which I believe is supposed to be sometime middle of, how long? A year?
A year.
I thought it was going to be 6 months, but anyway.
No, well,
You know, you just brought it up. I'm not saying it has to be in the motion, but I just wanted to it was something you brought up, so.
So I would move that we ask staff to take bids. Is that the next stage on this?
Seek proposals.
Seek proposals for preserving the terracotta inserts as a primary goal with the piers, and secondarily determine what other options we have for removing them or moving them.
Second.
Does that work, or is that too vague?
yeah, I don't
No?
know, it's too vague for policing kids.
You want us to seek proposals to remove the inserts and preserve them,
Yes.
and then demolish
Demolish the
piers
rest of the structure.
after that.
Yeah, or
Well,
if
but-
it's easier just to move the whole pillar.
Yeah,
That's-
I think,
If we
just
can
from
find a place.
experience, I think that is going to be a very tall order to try and move those intact and not really have success in essentially reinstalling them. You're going to have cracks in the brick. You have to do some retuck pointing. It's going to be very expensive. It just, I mean, your motion was made and seconded, but I just think that try and get the inserts out and then get rid of the piers, if that is your desire, essentially. I think that we're trying to add lots of staff to try and figure all that out and move them. And where are you going to put them? That's the other thing. Where are you going to warehouse them?
So then, Carly, do you have my motion? I'd like to cut off the end of it after the part about demolishing the
Why don't you-
piers.
Why don't you read it? If you read it back, please.
What I have is to ask staff to seek proposals for preserving the terracotta inserts as a primary goal. And secondarily, determine what other options are available for removing or moving.
Okay. So we maybe don't need options and we just need to remove.
You want to remove
wanna
them, but you want to save the piers out of the removal.
Yes.
It will be
so-
demolished, the rest of the structure will be demolished, but you want to pull out, and if, I don't know if they'll guarantee that either, but we could seek and see if they'll even bid on it.
Okay, so give me the first part of that motion again.
Ask staff to seek proposals for preserving the terracotta inserts as a primary goal.
And demolishing the piers as a secondary goal.
Second.
It's not really a goal. You want,
It's not
what
a
you want us
goal.
to do is you want us
Well,
to,
I want you to prioritize saving the terracotta inserts.
You're basically moving forward to deaccession the art
No.
and seek proposals on
you want to
preserving
demolish the
the.
piers, but you want to pull out
Yeah.
and save this terracotta inserts. That's what your goal, that's
Yeah.
what your,
Let-
right?
That is my goal.
All right, so now this. The alternative number 2 was authorize demolition of the 16 brick piers on Fifth Street, but direct staff to obtain quotes to have the ceramic relief removed for use in other art projects. That was the alternative on June 16th.
That was alternative number 2.
Does that summarize what you were looking for?
I think so.
I know
as-
you want to prioritize and go
Yeah,
in differently,
I
but I
mean-
think staff gets understands where you're
And
going.
just so it's understood, so there's no expectation that we're coming back to you to tell you yes, we can preserve them, no, we can't. We're gonna try.
Mhm.
And then if we can't, if we get no quotes, then demolition is authorized, right? That's your expectation?
Well, I'm not sure that people guarantee they won't be damaged in that either. You
I
understand?
think you're gonna have a hard time getting anybody.
Anybody to
I-
bid, if you're expecting, they'll try to do it, but
Well, it sounds like Valerie, at least, has talked to somebody who said that they could do this. So I'm optimistic that there will be somebody who will put in a proposal. So yes, option 2 encapsulates what I want, but as long as staff realizes that the primary goal is, if possible, to preserve those inserts.
I think that that's the essence of alternative number 2.
All right, so I will withdraw my first motion and move alternative 2
Second.
That's from
the June
13th meeting.
13th meeting.
All right. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Hey,
Motion carried.
And just again, so it's very clear. So if we are unable to obtain proposals from anyone to remove them, you don't have the expectation that we're coming back to you to make a different decision or do anything differently. You're authorizing us to proceed if we don't obtain proposals for removal that,
well, you'd have to rebid it then, wouldn't you?
or proposals that are reasonably priced.
Or you bid it, remove the inserts and demolish the piers.
Yeah.
And the second bid would be, is just to demolish the piers. And if you get no bids on the first one, and you get bids on the second one, that's telling you people are not going to take on the first.
I just want to make sure that there's not an expectation we're
I
coming
think it's
back
a
to
very-
the council.
I think it's a
to
very
remove
fair
them.
question.
Yeah.
I don't want to, once we demolish them, they're gone. We can't come back and have that conversation.
Is that everyone's understanding?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Happy anniversary, by the way. See our clerk and they'll get a note
Thank
for
you.
you. excusing you, so. Thank you. Thank you for your work on the
For your
Public Art
service.
Commission too. Thank you. All right, we'll move on. Item number 27, budget guidelines for CODA and outside funding requests.
Hello again, Mayor and Council. Last week, you provided staff some direction regarding a variety of budget-related issues. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be at the meeting, and so there were two issues where we still need some direction from you. One is regarding the pot of money that you are authorizing the Commission on the Arts to use in making its recommendations for art agency grants. Now, you'll recall that whatever amount of money the council authorizes, the public or the Commission on the Arts will make their recommendations for the agencies, but they will use every dollar. So they may not allocate every dollar to the agencies, but whatever is left over will be reserved for spring and fall special project grants. That's a decision that the Commission on the Arts makes after they review all of the proposals. So this year we had an increase both in the dollar amount requested and the number of agencies that are requesting CODA funding. The total request is a little over 14% greater. It's $32,892 above the amount that was budgeted for the current year. And so what we're looking for is a percentage increase from the current year amount that you're willing to authorize the staff.
Yeah, you recall what you did with assets. So we'll use a percentage increase.
I would move that we do a 5% increase.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Okay, then the second area is a little more complicated. This is the outside funding request process. These are a variety of different types of requests that don't really fit into any of our existing or other funding programs. There are a few unique twists this year. Last year, the City Council allocated some money from the Hotel Motel Tax Fund for a portion of the funding. What we'd like to do is normally we have used local option money to pay for parking meter waiver requests. That has been kind of tricky. We sometimes get requests that weren't budgeted. This again is an attempt to make the parking fund whole when we have these kinds of special events. What we'd like to recommend is that money for parking meter requests come out of the portion of the money that the council allocates from the Hotel Motel Tax Fund, right, for economic development. And what we'd like to also recommend is instead of just allocating the amount that's been requested, that we round that up a little bit to give us the ability to address unforeseen events or activities that might come up throughout the year. So staff is recommending that you take $10,000 out of Hotel Motel for that purpose. And then in addition to that, historically, the City Council has allocated $15,000 for AEDC workforce initiatives out of the Hotel Motel fund balance. So we're looking at $25,000 out of the Hotel Motel tax fund, and then the rest is out of local option. And this is where we are looking for an authorized pot of money where then the city staff can evaluate the requests in more detail depending on the amount of money that you've authorized, and we would make recommendations about what dollar amount should be allocated to each organization.
You have established criteria that
Yes.
you use for that too. I don't know. Can you just go very briefly what they are? That put you on the spot.
I can try. It's prioritized based on activities that the city would otherwise undertake, probably at a higher cost. Activities that are unique, that we don't have very many examples of in the community, and activities that appeal to a variety of interests within the community.
Not just one group.
Right.
So all we need is a pot of money there again.
So the total requested new money after we make those modifications with where the parking money has come out of in previous years, it's about a 13.1% increase in the amount of money coming out of the local option tax fund. Total requested. So.
Is there a motion? or discussion?
Can you remind us what we did last year? Was it a percentage or, oh, sorry, should have.
Last year, I want to say it was a 5% increase, but I don't recall for certain.
Well, I would move a 5% increase.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, move on to item number 28, Daily Park Splash Pad update.
What? Hey, Keith, you want your Brad to come up too?
Not for this one.
Oh, David Parker.
Yeah. So good evening, Mayor and City Council. So with the Daily Park Splash Pad, it's been a while since we've come back to you and we put some information, in the staff report. And just as a reminder, we did talk about different systems, recirculation system, which acts just kind of like a pool. And that is what the City Council had directed staff to do the design through. And then a flow through system is where the water basically comes out of it's potable water, goes through the features, and then right to sanitary sewer. So what we want to do is just kind of give you an update with things. And last time we were here, when we were showing things, we were using an example of a spray pad or splash pad from Nebraska. So the numbers that you see in the report, and I'm not going to go through all of these numbers are reflective of what we are looking at designing, 5,000 square foot facility. And with this, I should say that the numbers here in regards to water consumption, so we base, generally we have about 100-day season for our outdoor aquatics. We have factored in here about 91 days is what we're basing this on. So we have 9 days that either due to rain or cold that we're saying, hey, this won't even be functional. So on those 91 days, though, we're saying it's going to be operated for 10 hours. And that's, really the worst case scenario. If people are out there from the time that we turn on, and again, this would be a bollard activated system. So kids can come out, anybody can push the button. And then what happens is the water is sequenced through the different features. And some features might come on, others stay off, and then those turn off, others stay on, and kind of goes around that way. And then eventually they shut off, and then somebody pushes the button again, and they come on again and do that same thing. So this is when we're showing the dollar amounts and the 10 years and everything, it is based on the worst case scenario of it. Now, already, with it, so there is, like I said, we do factor in some days that, that would not be used. So in between the flow through, and the water is just going right to the sanitary sewer. So you're looking at about 11,330,000 gallons will go through that system and just go to the sanitary sewer. With the recirculation water usage, we're looking at about 577,000 gallons, or about 5% of what is used during the during the flow through. And this is really that water consumption is what council reason why you directed staff to go that route. So we look at the costs, and again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but the estimated project cost is just under 500,000 for the flow through. For the recirculation, we're looking at $1,340,000 approximately for that, and a lot of that is with the recirculation system. There's added pumps, there's a tank, there's some other things, but then also with it, you can see in the numbers, there's $425,000 for some additional restroom and shower facilities for the recirculation, which is required by Iowa Department of Health. So the estimated cost, for this, if we're looking 110,000 for a flow through, and that's the water, sewer, and then the maintenance to maintain it. For a recirculation system, that costs about 32,000. I should note within that 32,000, some of that cost is full-time staff. We're showing that is a cost that we have, but it's not an additional cost. We already have that cost involved, and that's about roughly almost $15,000 of that 32. But if we look at it, so if you say, all right, worst case scenario, well, what if we aren't operating at 10 hours a day? Maybe we're operating at 7.5 or even 5 hours a day. If we do that, if we're operating at 10, we're about, almost $80,000 more annually for the operating cost. If we do 7.5 hours, if we use that, we're looking at about $58,000 more per year to do a flow through than a recirculation. These numbers are not in your report. If we say it's only going to operate at 5 hours a day, which I think is too low, I think the 7.5 may be a little bit more accurate. But even if we did that, we're talking about $39,000 per year more to do the flow through and operating expenses. And this is really one of the biggest concerns that we have is incorporating, the additional operating expenses into the budget, especially looking at, some of the things that the state legislature has done and some of the restrictions that are going to be put on us. So with it right now in the CIP, we do have about $786,000. We're proposing in the 24-25 CIP to add an additional $556,000, and that would get us to that $1,342,000 for the capital costs of doing a recirculation. So there are 3 different options. Direct staff to proceed with the recirculation system. Option 2, direct staff to proceed with a flow-through system, or option 3, direct staff to not proceed with the splash, pad project. We do get a lot of questions. We do get a lot of interest in the splash pad. Again, this will be operated with no staff on site. We'll have to do things at the beginning from a maintenance standpoint, some things at the end of the day, but during the day, we do not have to have somebody on site. So we'll be able to offer it for more hours compared to the wading pool at Brookside when we're only open, generally about 5 or 6 hours a day. So a lot more time. So with this, I'm not going to go through, everything, but our staff's recommendation, is to move forward with the recirculation system, do the additional capital cost. We do show how we can fund that and really help us from an operational standpoint of the additional cost for water, sanitary sewer, and so on. So any questions?
So we're coming back to you. Remember, you talked about the recirculation system. I think we have better numbers now because we have additional facilities we have to build. It's treated by the state as almost a swimming pool facility, so it's got to have the more shower and locker room kind of buildings. But we want to make sure you agree with that. It's going to be more costly. We'll have a strategy to pay for that cost, but we want to start designing that so we can get that out on the streets. May hopefully get some good bids. So we want to come back with you, make sure with these updated numbers you're still behind it. Again, I think we have some real problems with the state law that's going to restrict our operating budgets, our general levy increases in the future. So anytime we add a new facility, and that'll hold with the swimming pool, indoor pool, and this, we're really concerned about adding those new costs with the restrictions from the state. So even though the capital cost is higher, we're avoiding the ongoing operational costs, which we're really scared about our ability to even raise enough taxes to cover all of our costs.
Keith, I was very supportive, and I am very supportive of locating this in Daly Park. I think we need to distribute public amenities in different parts of the community. But could you speak to the use of Daly Park in general?
Yeah, again, and I know council has asked questions about usage in the parks in the past. We don't have any tracking system, and I can't give you any numbers as far as how it's used. I know with the green belt that we have, you can go from Wilder all the way to South Dakota. That gets a lot of use. There is, and I don't have it offhand. I know the shelter, gets use. There are people that use the basketball court, the neighbors that are coming in, and so on. So it does get used, but there is a lot of space that doesn't get used at all.
Right. So my concern, it's a pretty big investment for us. And maybe this is a thing where we'll build it and they come, but I don't see a ton of kids as opposed to Brookside, where it's just tons of kids there. I get over there, I run the trails over there, and I don't see a ton of children in that area. And as we think about moving forward with this, you're still recommending the council that we locate it in Daly?
Correct. Yeah, and one of the things, with it, so we did do, if you remember when we suggested Daly Park, we went through all of our parks, and this is something that we're not going to put in a floodplain. So that rules out a number of parks. There are some parks that are just too small, to be able to do it. There's a lot of parks that don't have any kind of a restroom, there. Although we do have to add, restroom facilities. So an amenity like this, we talk at times about destination, amenities. Right now we have a lot of people going to McCarthy Lee to use those pickleball courts. Once we put those in, they are flocking to that, and even we've heard from some people that it's very difficult if you go there, you may wait a while because there's that many people using the courts. So we look at this as an amenity that is a destination type. So no matter where we put it in the park system, people will be coming to it.
And then I have one more question. There's not a ton of parking at Daly. So is that something that your staff will be sort of keep an eye on at some point? Because there's really not a lot of, you have to go a little ways to find street parking. And so is there room to build additional parking there?
There would be, but we also have worked with traffic, and we have discussed about, once this is built, is moving on-street parking from the west side of Wilder to the east side of Wilder. So when people come out of their vehicles, they can they're already on the park side, and that would happen. And I forget what the cross street to the south is, and it would go north. So we have talked with traffic and about that situation with parking.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions?
Keith, can you just, for the benefit of anyone who might be watching this, remind us why repurposing is not one of the options that is explored in this report, despite the fact that it's mentioned?
Yeah. We mentioned it because it is one of the options that we brought to you prior. But the reason that we did not recommend repurposing is it's very similar to the flow through, but you need to have either a very large tank or a pond, to collect the water to be used for irrigation. Generally is what people use it for. With the amount of water that will be used here, there's no way we would be able to store all that water. So a lot of it would wind up going to the sanitary sewer anyways. There'd be the additional cost of the tank or building a pond. And there's no way that we would be able to use all the water for irrigation with everything. So it would make more sense, if it was something that we would have space at, let's say, Homewood Golf Course, where we have an irrigation system, where we could do a pond and store all that water. That would make more sense to do the repurpose, and we probably would have recommended it. But in this case, that's why we're not recommending it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Keith, are you going to try and use the existing bathroom facility to comply with the IDPH requirements and just add
Yes.
showers?
Yes. Yeah. So there are, so IDPH does have, a number of fixtures that you need, for male and female. So we can use the fixtures that are in the current restroom, and then just the new restroom would just include the additional features that we would need to comply with.
So you are going to build a
IDPH.
separate brand new bathroom structure and shower.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, because it would also house, some of the controls and everything for the splash pad.
Do you recall what it cost to build the building across the street?
Just not offhand. I know the restroom. If you use the restroom at Innis Grove, the new one that we put in, that was about, I think, just right about 300,000, just maybe a little bit under.
I just struck by. I'm just not sure 425 is going to be adequate. And the point is that when you start looking at that, and I think to Tim's point, you're getting near to $1.5 million, investment, and
Yeah.
it's anyway. So
Yeah,
Right.
and I think that with the restroom also, it'll be operational for 3 to 4 months, because if the splash pad isn't operational, we probably will not have that restroom open.
I see. All right, is there a motion?
I would move option 1 that we direct staff to proceed with the Daily Park Splash Pad project with a recirculation water management system.
Second.
Okay. Those favor motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, Fitch Family Indoor Aquatic Center, follow-up questions.
Yeah, now we'll have, again, Troy Turner who's the project manager for Story Construction, who's the construction manager on the project. He's on the far right. And we have Brad Rodenberg, who is the project manager for RDG, which Planning and Design, who's the architect. So I'll just kind of give an overview, and then if there's questions, obviously Brad and Troy will be able to answer any specific questions that you may have about these. So when we brought plans and specifications to council, there were some questions that were asked. So with this, one of the questions was about the flooring for the walking area. We did look at multiple different options. RDG gave us a number of things. And really the one that flowed the best was this TerraFlex product that's spelled out in your staff report. So right now, currently, epoxy resinous flooring, roughly $11.20 per square foot. And that's per, Story Construction estimate that they did for construction. I'm not going to go through all the pros and cons with this, but then the product that we talked about was the Gerflor TerraFlex Sport M Plus. Now this is going to be the same product that we will have in the multi-purpose rooms, probably different color. We'll do one thing in the multi-purpose room, but then there's that easy transition from the multi-purpose space to the walking area. This is just about 7 millimeters in thick. Again, I'm not going to go through all the pros and cons, but with this, the lifespan of the TerraFlex is about twice, 20 years versus 10 years of the epoxy resinous flooring. And it does provide some of that cushion. And here the cost estimate is $13 a square foot, so it's very similar. $2 more per square foot. But one of the concerns that staff has with this product is this is the same product that we just put into the aerobics room floor, and that cost was $25 per square foot. It's about the third of the size, 1,500 square feet to just over 4,000 square feet. But that concerns us. So with this, with the flooring, our recommendation would be to add this or put this as add alternate number 4. We could see, if, what the price is. Is it going to come in at $12 a square foot? Is it going to come in at $25 a square foot? If it comes in at $25 a square foot, we're talking probably closer to $100,000 for that product, and maybe $46,000 for the resinous flooring. So, and then that way we could assess all of the bids at the same time, along with the alternates, and then bring to a recommendation to council at that time. Again, like I mentioned, at the last meeting is, staff and the design team has worked really hard to try to keep that base bid under 20.5 million. So we're really cautious about adding a lot of things to the base bid, and then costs come up or bids come in high, and we don't have a lot of flexibility to make decisions. And then all of a sudden the decision is, oh, now we won't do the multipurpose room and the walking area at all, which I think that's a council priority from what I've heard from you. So that's just a little bit there. The additional questions, the rails on the roof or future solar panels. With this, because there's a lot of different solar arrays and so on, RDG's recommendation is to not do anything with rails up on the roof. One, it's an added expense. Two, if we choose not to do, or if we decide or funding is not available to do solar panels in the future, that's there. But they also, and Brad can talk more to this in a little bit, is will it fit with whoever gets the bid when we do put it out to bid? It may not be compatible. We may put the rails up, and then all of a sudden we award a bid and the rails aren't in the right place, or they don't maximize the solar array. The natatorium acoustics, with this, RDG has done, these dovetail acoustic panels, decking on the ceilings, and Brad can share more on this as well. It's something that they have done in other spaces. They have not had to do additional acoustical panels or anything on the walls. The only time we really would consider is if there would be a competitive setting with a lot of seating, a lot of people in there, maybe live streaming swim meets and things of that sort, where acoustical is a higher level of acoustics is needed. And then the last one we talked about was the accessible parking spots. So with this, the plans do call for concrete, in those accessible parking spots. Just to the north of those accessible spots, there are pavers. It is there for the stormwater management that we have in the parking lot and for the site. So RDG's recommendation is not to move those to the south side or further to the south over where the accessible parking spots are. Leave them where they are, and council could make the decision for roughly $22,000, just a little over that, to add concrete or add pavers instead of concrete. But there are concerns. Even if you go out to the west parking lot of City Hall here, there are spots where there are settlements, there are trip hazards, there are some other things. So long term, it may be more difficult. So RDG's and Story Construction do not recommend putting pavers in this area for some of those reasons. The last thing that I'll mention, as we stated in here, we did submit, an additional grant for the CAT funding, and we did a presentation in early December, and we were awarded $500,000 for this project. So that's good news. We do have two options for council to consider. One would be direct staff to include in the bid documents the TerraFlex flooring in the walk-in areas built alternate number 4 and not change any of the plans and specifications for any of the other items. Or option 2, to recommend staff or direct staff to do bid alternate number 4 and change any of the others that may be needed. So staff's recommendation or with their comments would be to go with option number 1. So with that said, if there are specific questions about any of the recommendations, again, Brad and Troy are here to answer those questions.
Tim, we'll start with you. You'd asked about the flooring. Do you have any questions? Or
No, I just appreciate the iterative process that you've gone through, and your staff are looking at this the long term, and appreciate your input, and be interesting to see what the bids come in with. And I can't explain the delta between the price tag you've had in current usage versus what you're seeing here. That seems like a really big difference.
Yeah.
But I guess the proof will be when we do the bidding. Is the cost both labor and materials?
Yes.
And so if the materials are a fixed price, then is the difference on the labor piece then? Is that what's the?
We don't know. You don't know.
But
yeah.
So does it sort of have to be if the materials are a fixed price?
You think they all
They
go
might
to the
have
same
changed.
price, the material the same price, huh?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's sort of my
So it's gotta
question.
be
I
with
don't- It's a
labor.
really big difference in the price. I mean,
Yeah. 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 And we only had one bid, for the aerobics room flooring. If we have multiple bids, that may help, with it. But that $25 a square foot was for material and installation. And that's the same thing that Story is suggesting right now, but
That's why we
a much
bid it out
lower
by itself.
cost.
Yep.
Is that what Story's carrying that flooring for the multipurpose room at $25 a square foot?
No, around $13 a square foot.
Because it says in the report per manufacturer, and I've seen that story or that movie before where per manufacturer is materials only and not installation.
Right. No. The cost opinion includes $13 a square foot to furnish and install in the multipurpose rooms.
I'm going to be an optimist. I hope that
Yep.
the prices are closer to the 13. I've heard from a lot of running friends that they love the idea of having a better surface in there. So thanks for your work with that. That's all I had.
Yeah.
Gloria, any questions on the flooring?
I was just going to ask, are we anticipating on the flooring getting perhaps a better price because it's a larger project? Because we've seen in other instances where the projects are small, the prices go up.
Yeah, that definitely plays into construction costs for sure. The room that was $25 a square foot, my understanding, it was quite a bit smaller than this walking area. And so just to show up on site and mobilize, there's a fixed cost. And if you can spread that out over a larger area, your unit cost goes down. Also, this project that was $25 a square foot, it was an existing building versus a new building. So there's probably something that plays into that as well. So.
I don't have any other
Do
questions.
you want to ask about pavers? You'd ask about pavers.
Yeah, no, the report was clear.
Okay. All right. Can you explain me on your what you define as ballasted system for the roof?
Yeah, so in regards to ballasted system, it would be a rail system for the solar array itself. And it would sit atop the membrane roofing. So it would be a rail system that would be weighted, usually with CMU or other material that would hold that system down at the roof surface itself.
So what roof system are you putting in for over the natatorium in particular? Is it
So yeah, over the natatorium, it would have the dovetail acoustical deck, structural, spanning between structural members. Within each flute would be insulation filled. So from an acoustical standpoint, that's what we're looking at. And then it would have a substrate board on top of that deck, roof insulation, and then a EPDM membrane atop that roof insulation, which would also have a substrate board underneath that EPDM.
So you're going fully adhered with everything?
Right.
And then I presume you also have a robust vapor retarder on the top of them.
Yeah, so over the natatorium space specifically, it would have a vapor retarder atop or on top of the the steel deck itself. So would help with that atmosphere as it relates to the natatorium specifically.
And the bottom substrate board is mechanically fastened. Everything above that right now is designed for adhered.
Okay, so council, excuse some of my detailed questions.
Yeah, no.
But when you say mechanically attached, how deep is that screw going? Because one of the things that we talked about before is we do not want any anchors penetrating through into the natatorium itself. So
Right.
how are you going to make sure that you're not having problems with that going through? Because these guys seem to like screws this long because they're going to go ahead and, they'll make sure they anchor and stuff. So I'm just curious, could you comment? Because that one will be a game changer in terms of rust, decay, deterioration, vapor.
I was going to ask that question, by the way. No, I wasn't.
Yeah. So the screws would be shorter just because they're mechanically fastening that substrate board atop the deck. So they wouldn't be, typically they would mechanically fasten that whole system down.
Is it a fluted deck?
Itself.
Is the deck fluted?
Yeah, it's a fluted deck, and the steel deck is 3.5 inches thick.
Okay.
And then the fasteners are specified to be stainless steel over the natatorium.
So the fasteners would go within that flute. So you wouldn't from below see any of those fasteners specifically as far as how that deck would be designed.
In lieu of taking up council's time, I just all I've seen this movie before. I just want to be on record. We do not want absolutely any fasteners going through the bottom part of the metal deck being exposed into it.
Okay.
And we have specified that before, and it still gets put into it. So I'm just saying, just so we're clear, that's the expectation. So
okay.
So one of my concerns is just this ballasted system for holding down these frames. It's a great way to puncture a roof membrane. Two is the concrete blocks deteriorate very quickly. And the other thing is that we're going to have giant sails up there and the concentrated load. And I know they're going to put a second membrane underneath that, but I just, without going into a lot of I just have concerns that it's really not the best approach to try and support. And we think we are really working towards trying to get funding to put, it's not just well, it'd be nice to have. We're really looking at getting that to try and defer, operational costs.
The solar.
Yeah, the solar array. And so I just, I'm not going to tell you how to do your job, but I just think that there are other ways you could try and figure out some way to prepare for that in the future. That would be the best for the city. But with that, your staff recommends following your recommendations. So on acoustics, Keith, I guess the only question I have is, what is staff's criteria and expectations for sound within the natatorium?
Yeah. So with it, if we have lap swimming, we have water walking, we have swim lessons, we have, I guess more so over the open recreation, there's going to be noise. There's going to be people. It's not one of those things where we're going to have a lot of people that are going to be sitting around having conversations with it. So with swim lessons, with that, instructors will need to communicate with the students. Yet, we're at the Forker Pool right now. There's no acoustical panels, in that area. And I talked with staff, and they are not having any issues, with that. So we will probably play music, at times when the open swims are going on. We'll have aerobics classes, going on and so on. So the expectation is, so if we have something like that, people will be able to hear. Now, in talking with, Brad and his staff, in giving some of the examples, and he can talk about Trail Point with what they did for acoustics down there. And I've been in that facility, and when I came out of that facility, there was activity going on. When I came out of that facility, I did not say, wow, it was really hard to hear, or the noise was just extremely loud. but why don't you explain?
And just sort of comparing apples to apples, it also has an indoor slide. It also has the same features, the lazy river and the lap pool that you're talking about. Because the point is, Forker, I don't think has a slide.
Correct.
It doesn't have a lazy river. It doesn't have all those other pieces. And when we want to hear kids having a blast, having fun. So.
Yeah. So Trail Point is either one. It's got the lap pool, competition pool. It has seating for 500.
Yeah, it has an 8-lane, 25-yard pool, seating for 500 spectators.
It also
and then
has a recreational
a recreation pool tank as well. So we
And a slide also.
Say that again.
And a slide also.
No slide.
No slide.
Yep. So we specified that this same acoustical deck in that for that project as well. It's been open around 5 years or so, and they have not added any acoustical panels to the wall or anything in addition to that.
And they have swim meets there.
Yeah, it's used by both Ankeny High Schools for competition, both diving and lap swimming.
And we're not anticipating having any in our facility.
No.
Yeah, more on the recreation side.
All right. I have no further questions.
Okay, we'll proceed then.
Well, you need a motion.
I'd move option 1.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank you.
have a good evening and happy holidays.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
All right, move on to item number 30, review of Ames 2040 redirection areas.
Let's see if you got the map. Let's see if you got your map. Hopefully he's got the dots. Let's see.
Tonight, we're here as a follow-up from a council referral to staff to discuss priorities for infill areas of the city. We attached a presentation to the staff report outlining some of the background that went into Ames Plan 2040 and the areas that we highlighted in the sense of larger areas that we called redirection areas. When we created Plan 2040, it was not known for sure what maybe the best use of land in these neighborhoods might be. Could there be possible intensification? Primarily for residential purposes, there might be mixed use, but the redirection areas weren't about redeveloping commercial to commercial. They were about looking at adding housing options. So what we've put forward to you is a quick summary of the 8 areas that are currently identified in Plan 2040. And in the presentation, we give you some facts about those. Tonight, we have, when we talk about the specific ones, we did add zoning maps as well. So the maps that you had were the land use plan, which is the future land use, which may not reflect reality of how zoning looks today. So we have both tonight if you want to compare and contrast that. We're recommending that the council give direction as we see here on this bottom bullet of city council discussion. The point tonight is to prioritize if one or more of these areas should be rolled into the work plan discussion in January or February, and then evaluated in the time commitments and the effort that would need to go into those studies against other council priorities, which there are many from the last review we had in October. So if we have council interest in 4 of those, I will put together 4 scopes of work for that, and you can understand what the time investment is and what the expectations would be. If there's 1, I'll put together 1 scope of work, and then you'll prioritize that at a later date. In addition to the main focus tonight, which was the redirection areas in the staff report, we also alluded to that the idea that there's scattered sites across the community. Plan 2040 did not identify every property that might have potential for redevelopment. We listed a few in there that are privately owned, but we did highlight at the end of the report that in the spirit of the conversations we had recently about our housing needs in the community and looking for diversity of housing and what opportunities we might as the city have to advance that, we did highlight that a scattered site, which is some leftover right-of-way from Harrison Road up north, would be appropriate for city staff to propose back to council, again, in the work plan process, an RFP process, to look at having that land made available for development. So we're not really talking about scattered sites tonight, but it was the first opportunity I really had to introduce that idea to you. You will see that again later in the work plan. So with that, I want to set this rest of this meeting up really to have city council dive into any specific areas that they're interested in reviewing. We don't really need to walk through each of the sites or the areas if that's not a priority to the city council. So at this point, I would move forward to where we have discussion of the different redirection areas. And we added this map for tonight also, a little hard to see. The red areas are the 8 areas that we have individually identified. And that should help us get started.
Kelly, maybe staff recommended or suggested that area 1 and 2 were the ones that you felt were the most would be consistent with council goals, as well as maybe provide the best opportunity. Maybe you could just highlight, why, and then if council wants to delve into some of the other ones, they could. But I think those are ones that seem to be based on your professional and your team's professional expertise, what you believe is a.
So the 2 areas that we said seem to have the most immediate redevelopment or interest in by the market in seeing other housing options would be this area west of campus. This is Highland right here, if you can't read that, and this is Lincoln Way. And then we had this area south of campus, which is really along Hunt Street and Knapp Street are kind of those border streets. Now, if in the west area, it's really hard to say that Lincoln Way is a one-sided street. So we'd probably look at both sides of Lincoln Way if we're doing this west area. And the west area is quite large. So I'm going to move quickly to I'll start with the west, even though it's number 2.
And Kelly, could you give us a sense of the values that are driving your priorities? Like, so what are the things that are driving one and 2 over others?
Sure. So I guess we're looking, what we're trying to do is apply the lens from Plan 2040 to these areas. We selected them previously and said they're worth investigating. And what we're looking at here is why would you pick one now over a later date was really based on whether we thought there was market potential to see actions of producing new housing in these areas. So long term, a lot of these areas will change over, buildings will age out and be ready to be replaced. We thought, especially in the west and the south, there are some vacant lots. There's some aggregated property ownership. There's clearly a market for student housing development in these areas. We thought those factors all together really push those 2 to the top of the pile in terms of likelihood of development interest in the areas. And that was really what we were looking at. Now, exactly what redevelopment is, that's what I can't tell you it's going to be. That's where the outreach process will really direct ultimately what city policy is for these areas.
And did the location in general, access to Cyride, proximity to the university, were those also values that weighted your decisions?
I think indirectly. I think that when we put these in here, we all recognize that Lincoln Way is a transit corridor and it can support higher density and it fits some of our sustainability goals to have infill housing that has transit access. So I think indirectly it fits that, but it wasn't a primary driver.
Okay, thank you.
So this is the slide you had in your packet. You can kind of see here on the east side, you have much more density with the apartments along Highland. Highland's essentially apartments on both sides. Right through the middle here, you have West Street, which you all know has a few neighborhood commercial establishments. And then slowly the area starts to transition into your typical single family lots that pretty much permeate throughout this western neighborhood area. Now, what you have in these areas is quite a mix. And this is the land use map. Again, you can kind of see where the orange is the higher density and the green-ish, I don't know what color that even is the lower density neighborhoods. And then you have the corridor along Lincoln Way. The differences here are really the housing types is very heavily rental, especially near Lincoln Way. We went through this when we talked about the near campus neighborhoods and the rental cap. This is one of those areas that was one of the the bigger conversations and arguments about which way should we go? Should we have a cap or not? So we're very familiar. There's a large number of rentals here. So because of that, that's where we come from, that maybe some of these properties are able to be purchased. Some of them are maybe able to be redeveloped by current investors to add housing units and not just have the single housing unit there. At the same time, we know that this transitions into ownership housing and other single family homes. And we have the same conversation constantly about how do we preserve affordable housing that's already existing. So you're going to be in this conversation in this neighborhood 100%, trying to balance what's appropriate to preserve, what's appropriate to intensify. So that's why there's no clear answer. That's why you need a study. And that's why we picked this area as being the most options on the table of all of them, probably for choices that could come out of this. And you could go a lot of different directions. Any questions about this one specifically? And this is the zoning map. So you can really see that divide, the hard line there of the orange is high density and the yellow or lighter colors, single family zoning.
So Kelly, north of Woodland, I'm remembering this from way back, so it could have changed. It seems like more of that is single family owner occupied than some of the other areas. And there are also topographical challenges posed by a stream that's in there and woodland. Hence Woodland Street. So can you speak to any of that? The area, I suppose maybe the olive green north of Woodland. Let's say that.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with that kind of generalization of the area. I don't think we brought the rental concentration information with us tonight, but I would agree with that. I don't think you brought that, did you?
No, we did look at where the rentals were, and yeah, the northwest corner there, I believe is all owner occupied there. I did look to see what was owner occupied and what was rental.
It seems, unless something's changed, that the Oakwood Forest neighborhood exists up there, and it has traditionally been pretty solid owner occupied, but that could change.
East of Forest Glen, there were some rentals. I don't believe there were any rentals west of Forest Glen.
Yeah. So what about the topographical challenges up in that area? I'm actually asking this probably because of the size of this redirection area and the fact that it encompasses something that's perhaps more challenging for a number of reasons.
Yeah, I think the geographical challenges are more on this larger property. You can see a little stream channel that's represented right here. So there's some area back in here that's probably not buildable. There's some influences back here. This parcel, though, probably has redevelopment potential. It's underutilized with some non-conforming things that are in that general area.
Yeah.
So even though there's some topography there, there's probably also development potential there. But obviously, as you go down into this area, that's not an issue. It's really just the woodland area, potentially, as you said.
And these are things that we'll hear more about, right, as we look at each one of these areas. So I get the sense this is supposed to be more of an overview of which areas we think have the most potential. And then we're going to hear all these details. So I don't know that we need to hash them all out tonight necessarily.
I'm not trying to hash them out. I'm just trying to understand that, just because it's a large area. It's the
biggest one, right?
Yeah.
It has the most, well, south of Lincoln's pretty large too, but this probably has the most diversity overall. Certainly the most influences for different things you could come up with to do in this area.
Okay. Area 2.
So that was technically area 2.
Oh,
I'll go
shoot.
back to area 1. I'm sorry. So area 1 was the area between Hunt and Knapp Street, basically from Sheldon over to, missing the street there. What do we have?
Goes all the way past Stanton.
Yeah, over to Stanton. So the intent here is this one is really already all RH zoning. What's unique is obviously Hunt Street is not apartments for the most part right now. It's individual homes that we've called dwelling houses. It's a different category of house. You get to have 5 bedrooms for rentals in that area, which is somewhat unique. Most of the city that wasn't, at least till a few years ago, you couldn't do that in any home. It was only in this select area where you had these dwelling houses. Very underutilized in terms of of density and intensity in that Hunt Street area. So I think to us, it's already zoned RH. Why are the reasons we're not seeing the apartments or the other types of housing that could go there other than dwelling houses? There's a few vacant lots that are under common ownership. Really clearly a chance to plan for the future here rather than just end up with whatever your default RH building type is. I think it does start to change as you go east. Again, this is on Knapp Street. You have an interface where you start to transition to a different neighborhood. You have some buildings that have been redeveloped closer to Knapp Street. So a lot of the emphasis would be on the west side. There would still be some of these properties on the east side that also need to be looked at.
So those are your two priority areas.
Those are the two where we think the market demand would be the greatest, yes. And then you could see some real positive change in terms of the housing conditions probably at the same time, not just for the sake of having new housing, but also that you can improve the block look, you can improve the conditions of the area as well.
I know that the university owns the ball field. They don't have a ball team anymore. Do you know, does anyone know if that's still being used as for the purpose that it was designed for?
Yes.
Okay.
I think Rec Services has control
Got
of
it.
that entire.
Okay.
There's no desire
southwest
to
of-
do away with that land now.
I just thought that if it was something which really is being used infrequently, I mean, it's got utilities, it's got street access. I mean, and I think Iowa State is also looking for housing, so I just didn't know if that would be wrapped into it, but if it's being used for other program use, then it's off the table and move on.
And I did want to highlight with this one, when we did Plan 2040, one of the tasks that RDG had was to envision some of these areas. So this was a sketch where they tried to look at how to do different types of apartments, different row homes, just different things. If we're doing the redirection area, this is not what we're married to. This was one idea, but it does help paint a picture of what are different things you can do on different types of properties in this area. So we have a few of these, but none of them are necessarily a concrete plan themselves.
Any questions on Area 1? So I'll just throw this out, and that is, if council remembers quite some time ago, Chuck Winklelat came up and said that they're running out of space or land for commercial, industrial. That precipitated approving up there in North Dayton, that development, that's getting sold pretty quickly. Did staff think about or propose or what areas might be looked at to free up more property for that particular use? Since it's not, obviously housing is a big issue, but I was just curious to get out in front of that comment that he made, because South Bell was pretty much all getting close to being developed.
That was not in the scope
Industrial land, you mean?
of this consideration.
You mean industrial land?
Is that what he was talking about specifically? Was industrial?
Small industrial. Yeah.
Small industrial. Yeah, small industrial. Thank you. Small industrial.
And what,
That's not going to go in these.
take me back to the meeting where you're saying that Mr. Winkleblack brought that up. Which meeting was that?
Oh, it's quite some time ago.
Okay, yeah. So what
So
Steve
that-
said,
that-
originally that was all about, small lot industrial.
Yeah, that precipitated in the rationale for doing North Dayton.
Yeah.
Which is now almost all sold. So I'm just thinking, is there any merit to thinking about other areas that would be closer in that should be thought about? in
I
terms
just
of that
don't
kind
think any of those would be the redirection areas that we're looking at
redirection.
here.
Yeah.
This is mostly
Yeah, the
housing.
Prairie View industrial area, we have 1,100, 1,200, acres. There's nothing that says you can't carve off some of that for small lots.
Okay.
But we should talk, if that's the next phase, we might want to do that.
Yeah, so we did not dig into any other land use issue. We were focused strictly on the 8 areas that were identified in
These are for
2021.
residential.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
primarily residential, mixed
some
use
commercial.
commercial. Yeah. I mean, the area where we talk of east of Duff, south of Lincoln, which is an HOC area, maybe that's a mix of service industrial, but it's not really going to be the industrial kind of things we have out in Dayton.
Yeah, I'm trying to be out in front of and recalling what we've been hearing from other, from the developers, and trying to say, how can we make sure that we're contemplating those other aspects? But I get the fact that this is primarily for housing and or mixed use. But, anyway. All right.
Are we making a motion then, or?
Well, is there
what
any,
are we
does it,
doing?
before you do that, is there any questions that council has on any other areas, or do they concur that staff has identified the 2 areas that really should be included in a work plan going forward?
Was 7 the third one you proposed that we?
Yeah, so Northwestern, so just to the west of downtown, right in this area. It's not very large, but it has some synergy with other planning efforts we're doing near downtown. So it could have a pretty good rationale of why you might want to consider that in 2024 or 2025. It's just not very large. And what we noted here is that one of the key pieces shown at the time of the redirection areas, give me a second here to get there. It contemplated these residential lots up here, which are kind of large and deep, maybe having more value and being able to repurpose to other housing. At this point, it doesn't look like that would be true. It's pretty much owner occupied. There's not multifamily already in that quadrant of it. So if we're looking at this, we're probably focused on what can really happen here with some of these commercial buildings and some of these other remnant residential properties. So it's not a big area. It's kind of small, but it does have some value. I also noted, which site did that go on to? There we go. We also said that if we looked at this, it would make some sense to take a look at this corner. It's technically downtown core area. It's not that redirection area, but that's kind of a loner corner in terms of downtown, and it would make some sense to think about it if you're doing this area anyways. But I think it's just a question of, yeah, they all have some merit. Is this the one that we want to spend time with?
Is that lower section considered part of this too, or is it just
To the railroad
north of the
tracks,
track?
just north of the tracks. South of the tracks is a separate one. So where the aquatic center is planned is a separate area.
All right. Will you offer a motion?
Before that, I did want to comment just from a student's perspective, both areas 1 and 2 are very highly sought after, mostly area 1 more particularly because it's so close to that downtown area where all the bars are and where all the the fun stuff is. And so I definitely think if you focus on residential, high density residential in that area, that it would be successful. So I just wanted to comment.
Thanks. All right. Is there a motion?
I would move that we prioritize the 3 areas that staff recommended in the report, 1, 2, and 7.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
One additional one. When we think about intensification, are we looking solely at increasing the numbers of units of density, or also creating diversity in terms of price points? So one of the things I think about, it's very challenging for staff at Iowa State to find housing in Ames, and I would love to find an opportunity to create opportunities for staff persons. So it's not just student housing, but if there were some other housing options, I have that. I'm having conversations all the time with staff that can't find housing here.
So I think the outcome of the studies is that there's multiple building types that belong in different redirection areas. Some of them would be your typical high density apartment structures, but there might also be the missing middle housing, which is smaller structures. It could be walk-up townhomes. It could be other things. Most of those things aren't permitted now in the zoning. That's why it's a redirection area, is to see if there's I think we're going to write a new zoning district in the west area to allow for multiple building types that I don't know we're going to force you to build different building types, but we're definitely going to accommodate different building types.
Yeah, thanks for that.
All right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining?
Do we need a motion on that? What did you call it?
If you want to, I just said I would bring it back to you for your consideration in the future.
So you will regardless?
I'm going to do that regardless, unless you
Okay.
tell me not to.
No, I think you should.
So- Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't have to tell me to
Perfect.
do it. Just tell
Thank
me
you.
not to do it.
No, do it.
Perfect. Love it. Thank you.
All right.
So what's the next step look like? Can you give us sort of a preview?
Next step will be when we come back with the work plan, try to lay out an estimate of what the outreach plan would be for the areas, kind of an hours and time commitment, and give you a sense of what it would take to go out and do this and what kind of effort you're expecting from staff on it.
And so on the other side of this, we'll look at zoning. Are there any other levers that we would look at to try to incentivize this redevelopment? So for example, tax incentives?
I just think it's too early until you know what you want to do in that area and what the market would support. Ultimately we'll come up to that conversation, but that's probably at the end of the process rather than the beginning.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, move on to item number 31, hearing on text amendment for public nuisance property maintenance related changes to Ames Municipal Code.
All right, just give me a second here. So we're back as follow-up from October 10th. At that point in time, we had come forward as city staff representing multiple chapters of the Ames Municipal Code to bring it in a full alignment with the recently adopted Public Nuisance Code, the Property Maintenance Code in Chapter 30. We got direction at that time to principally deal with questions around parking, vehicles, and storage. So the majority of this ordinances, which are affecting 4 different chapters of the code, not just the zoning ordinance, that is what we're talking about. The key things I think we want to bring up are that the distinction of storage and parking is very meaningful in the zoning ordinance. So what we have here is a lot of new definitions that are coming from the property maintenance code into zoning. So we have to balance out that terminology that it matches with what we had previously regulated or not regulated, and that we're doing it consistently. So the key thing here is that when you're talking about a vehicle, parking of a vehicle has to occur on an approved surface, just like that's our front yard parking standards. That's our parking lot standards that we have for everybody. The key is that the parking is for 72 hours or less. That's our typical standard. Storage kicks in at after 72 hours. The key, so for that distinction, that applies citywide, basically in all our zoning districts, and then each zoning district decides whether parking or storage is permitted, not whether it's defined as something else. So for residential, which is the main focus of all of this, the key things that council looked at in October was the storage of junked vehicles, the parking of RVs, trailers, and boats. And then in relation to all that, we had to deal with parking of regular vehicles as well. So you saw at the beginning of our staff report a list of the things we talked about in October, and we really emphasized that the storage of junked vehicles is one of the more meaningful changes in relation to how the property maintenance code was adopted versus how we are kind of reconciling all of our codes together. So with the property maintenance code, there's a standard in there that says if you have a junked vehicle, after 48 hours, it must be screened or covered. That's all it says. So the implications to some people were, that means I can have it forever if it's just screened or covered. Well, the zoning ordinance has a separate regulation that says you can't have one for more than 30 days. So now we're reconciling the two here, where the zoning ordinance as drafted will permit someone to have one junked vehicle outdoors for up to 30 days, and it will be per vehicle, per property. So you could have more than one junked vehicle over the course of the year, but it can't be the same one on the same property. What does the covering and the screening requirement mean? It still applies. You can only be uncovered for 48 hours. After 48 hours, you'd still have to be covered. But at 30 days, it would have to be removed as these ordinances are currently drafted. And I think we highlighted that for you because that was a communication issue that's potentially been out there because of, again, some people thought, well, it was said one way. Does that mean it's unlimited? And no, we're saying, no, since October, we went this direction and say we're going to cap it at one vehicle and it's going to be for 30 days. The other thing that we noted for you, which was unsaid, but we again presumed was meant, was that no one was expecting that a resident's vehicle had to move off of their own driveway after 72 hours. So if you're on vacation, you own your car, you leave it in your own driveway, that's not storage. So now the zoning ordinance is clear that every regular usage of an apartment parking lot or a driveway, that car can just be there as long as it's operable and doesn't fall into the junked vehicle definition. So that's the other distinction that we made. So those are the two things we really wanted to highlight at the beginning, just to make sure everyone was clear where this all landed. There is a lot of nuance in this. We did add a table that we thought was helpful in the addendum, so you could kind of see the old code, the new code and what that change meant and try to capture the issues by topic so you could see how that went through the ordinance. As I said, we're touching 4 chapters. We're touching chapter 22, which is management of the right-of-way. The key thing there is it used to be streets, which was unclear about if it's outside of a street, but in the right-of-way, what do you do? Now that's all clear. It's all defined on right-of-way, what obstructions are, how you can get a permit to be a temporary or a permanent obstruction. The other chapter was 18. The final changes in there are really just to reconcile how front yard parking is enforced. We have both front yard parking in the chapter 18 and in the zoning ordinance, and that's intentional. So parking enforcement can write tickets to people that park illegally, not go into a zoning violation process, which is about the property owner. So we've now reconciled that. One thing we were unable to do, which we noted, was the section about regulating equipment parking on the street. We weren't really able to successfully work that into the current language in chapter 18. And staff is emphasizing that although we didn't adjust 18 tonight with those changes, we really need to revisit that. Our enforcement options are very limited with the current language that we have. The intent is clear, but the way we measure and enforce is very difficult for police. So it will need to come back to you for some cleanup and get better direction from council holistically rather than just about one issue. And that'll come back at a later date. So equipment is managed under streets and sidewalks as an obstruction because it's not a vehicle. So it's now something that if you're going to keep it in the right of way, you need to have a permit. Otherwise, it's an obstruction. And then with chapter 30, we're just cleaning up the cross references. There's no new requirements that are in chapter 30 that weren't already understood to be the requirements. And then, as we said, 29 has a number of edits, mostly around definitions. And with
I do want to say that our inspection staff's a little nervous because this is a complex issue that's evolved. And at some point at the beginning, before we're talking about the property maintenance code in our recommendation, it didn't have the 30-day limitation in it. And there was an exemption if you put a screen, the junk car, or you put a tarp over it. So I think you may hear afterwards, well, the city staff, when they went out, they didn't tell us that you were taking away that exception for the tarp. I think it's a good thing you do. I'm not being critical of it. Just as it evolved, I'm not sure we went back out and told the public that it's changed. So we have some education to do now is all I'm saying. We didn't try to mislead people. It just evolved.
Okay, questions for staff? All right, I'll declare the public hearing on the text amendment for public nuisance property maintenance related changes to the Ames Municipal Code to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic tonight? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing to be closed. Is there any closing comments or questions? And Kelly, just for clarification, if council agrees with everything you just talked about, there's no changes necessary. It's already in the ordinance that way, correct?
It's already drafted that way.
All right.
I appreciate all the work staff has gone to try and capture what we were intending and reconcile these codes.
Okay. All right, entertain a motion on first.
If I could, one question. Kelly, so could you just real quickly, because there'll be some people that will push back on this. What is the reason why we would want a junked vehicle, even if it's covered, to be moved off the property after 30 days?
Why would you what?
Why would we want that to be moved off? What's the public good for that?
I mean, I would put it back to the comments you received before, I guess. It's just that value of, or do you want to see something that's not a traditional residential use of your property encumbering the front yard of the property, some other element of the yard area of that property? It's going to have to be on a paved surface. It won't be able to be in your backyard on the grass. So I guess that's really the question. You can't use, whether it's there for 30 days or not, you can't use a required parking space for it. So if you're a one-car driveway or a one-car garage, you're not going to be able to keep a junk vehicle anyways because it's going to block access to your required parking. It's going to be the properties that have at least a 2-car wide or extra area to park things where that junk vehicle is going to be. And
we do get complaints from other people, even with a tarp on it. It's not.
I think it's considered just unsightly. Yeah. I mean,
and they can place it in their
tarps
garage.
Are not the most sightly thing that you
Unlimited
see.
In their garage.
Right. I mean, and I agree with it. it's really just an aesthetic issue.
I think so, because if it hosted vermin or something else, we'll use the property maintenance code from another angle to come after it as a nuisance from that perspective.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that it was an aesthetic purpose.
I believe that would be true.
Yeah, thanks.
Entertain a motion on first passage of ordinance.
Move on first.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Moving on, item number 32, hearing on zoning text amendment to paving standards for basic utility uses and other similar uses. Any questions for staff on this particular item? I don't think any review is necessary. The report's well done. Declare public hearing on this zoning text amendment to paving standards for basic utility uses to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this item? Seeing and hearing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on first passage of ordinance.
Move on first.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 33. And council, you received 3 emails regarding ADUs. And I think, Rachel, maybe you had a question that you wanted to pose before we take up second reading. So do you want to go ahead and pose that?
Yeah, so one of the questions was about if you would be able to have a short-term rental, like an Airbnb, and a rental with the way that the code is written. Would that be possible or not?
So we at our last week, I guess only a week ago. Wow, it seems like a long time ago. I did give you a memo addressing 2 of these issues. One of them was the question of a home share as an Airbnb being used. And our conclusion was the way the language is now, a home share has to be in the primary residence. Okay. But what we added was if the ADU was licensed as a rental, then you could still use the primary residence for a hosted home share. And the commenter is asking you to restrict it that can't happen. So if you do nothing, I could have a letter of compliance on the ADU or the house, and then I can in my primary residence still be a hosted home share as a short-term rental. But
How do you qualify for a home share? How you have the
it has to be
owner
your
has-
primary residence, and you have to use it for no more than 90 days in the year for that purpose.
But in those 90 days, is the homeowner always at the property?
No, they did, for the 90-day one, you do not need to be present.
And how does the parking play out in that setting?
There's no parking difference for a short-term lodging from any other use. You don't have to add extra parking. So if the ADU requires 1 extra space above the house, but no short-term lodging requirements have extra parking.
I think you're getting pushback because we once said that we want the owner
Be present
to be present all the time.
in one of the 2 units.
Yeah,
But-
so doesn't that make it
I think it's-
not possible for us to allow this?
So I think you might be taking that too far.
Now, that was
It
philosophical.
has to be their primary residence. They don't have to be present all of the time, right? I can go on vacation for 60 days
Yeah,
and
but-
I'm not there, but it's my primary residence.
But the Airbnb is different. That's 90 days. They will rent it out or can rent it out.
Yeah, up to 90 days without registering it as
That's
a
not
rental.
vacation of the owner. That's the owner's gone.
So the question
Be
is,
there or not be there, right?
so the question becomes,
Oh,
does
okay.
council want, as it's written, allow that to occur? And the sender of the email was asking that not be allowed. And if council is fine with the way it is written, then we'll proceed with the second reading and move on.
And move on second.
And I just-
Wait, is there a second to her second?
Second.
All right.
I just question, I mean, we can always come back and revisit this if there are problems. I just don't, we had data from, I don't remember off the top of my head, from Cedar Rapids and Des Moines. We've had these for a while, and there aren't a ton of them being built. So I'm not losing sleep that the sky is falling on this, and we try it out and we see how it works.
Which is the same for the property maintenance code, the same thing in terms of just, I think it was discussed that, within a year, having a staff report coming back and tell us how it's going. All right. Roll call.
Can I make
Oh,
one comment?
Yeah.
The second comment that she raises about the 25% limit, I did address that in the memo last week, but after seeing it again, I would advocate that we maybe do clarify my interpretation of how we would apply the standard and make that the statement. So what she was asking was that you actually apply the 25% limitation to the ADU. My comment was that was never your intent. It was regulated by setbacks and rear lot coverage, not the house size. I think after looking at her comment again, it would be better to add that ADUs are not subject to that 25% when you finalize this ordinance. It's clear after you talk to people, they could see why staff could be interpreting that wrong. And it seems to be better to reinforce what council intended and by saying they're exempt from that 25% rule, which is the opposite of what she's asking for. But it really underscores it's important probably to make that clear.
So is your suggestion that as part of third reading and adoption to include that clarification?
Yep, that an ADU is not subject to the 25% floor area restriction of the primary residence.
Okay, so let's vote on the motion that's for second passage. And then we can take up a motion giving you direction on that one. Then.
Yep.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Okay.
I would move that we direct staff to clarify that ADU is not subject to the 25% floor area ratio.
Second.
You want to add that to the ordinance on third readings.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Roll call.
Aye.
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 And council, I think that the Tam who sent the email did a very nice job of laying stuff out. Could I get a motion to ask Kelly if it would be okay for Kelly to respond and just explain? Because you actually maybe could send the memo and just maybe address her question, out of respect, because it was really, I think, well thought out, and it just gives that.
We talked to her
Memo
before.
for that? I
too.
mean,
Just a
We
motion.
talked to her before too. She's involved frequently in the
Yeah.
in decisions.
Okay, so she's
plugged.
if you can just
I'm
let her
happy
know.
to talk to her again, but we've also talked to her before.
Yeah,
Before she
and
wrote the
she's-
letter.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. Item 34. Entertain a motion on third reading and adoption of ordinance number 4515, amending Chapter 28, Division 1 for eligibility of customers for the time of use based on electrical demand.
Move on third.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, moving on. Dispositions, communications of council, number 1, number 2, and number 4 were all part of the ADU.
Correct.
So we just have one from Bob Bourne regarding a request for inclusion in the budget. Study for potential pedestrian bridge over Lincoln Way at Ash Avenue.
I feel like I've seen this movie, and we had a study on this, and I feel like I didn't have any questions about the study, and I appreciate Bob's heart in this just to help our students be safe. So I'm not dismissing that, but haven't we done this, Steve?
I think we looked at it. I don't know if he's suggesting it not be in the same place,
Yeah.
I guess, as the location, but we looked at it on Welch Avenue when we looked at a number of options for making those crossings more safe on the cross-legged way.
I would move that we decline to take action on that at this time.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to decline taking action. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right. Wow. Last council comments of the year. And we'll start with Jeff tonight.
All right, switching it up. So I don't have much. Winter break or winter term has started for ISU students, so it's pretty exciting. And other than that, that's about it. I wish everyone a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, et cetera, et cetera. That's about it.
Brown,
Nothing additional for me. Thanks.
Rachel,
Nothing tonight.
Amber.
Nothing for me.
Just wanted to affirm the congratulations for the CAT grant.
Yep.
That will help with our Fitch Center. So.
Nothing tonight.
I would just like to say that I have served on the Discover Ames board for a very long time now, and I'm going to miss those meetings. but I look forward to joining the AEDC board again, since that was my first appointment on council.
Good.
So,
I got a couple of things. One is congratulations to the 5 council members who were sworn in this morning: Gloria, Tim, Anita, Brown, and Rachel. And looking forward to the next minimum 2 years working together. Secondly, I had the honor last night to read a certificate of appreciation for the retirement of Sarah Buck. She has served for 30 years on the hospital board, and under her leadership, they kind of recounted just some of the things that went on. Pretty amazing. Anyway, just I look up to her as a leader of a board, and wish her well as she transitions into the next stage of things. But anyway, and like Jeff, just want to wish our entire community a happy holiday and happy New Year, and we will reconvene the 9th of January of next year. So with that, entertain a motion to adjourn.
move we adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
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 We are adjourned.